Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Perpetual Chess. We have a return guest, a renowned author that I am really looking forward to catching up with. We will introduce him momentarily. First, wanted to give thanks, as always, to our sponsor, Chessable.com. Our guest, of course, has one of the biggest hit Chessable courses in Chessable history. This is my conjecture, actually. I don't have any hard facts on that. But of course, Woodpecker Method, immensely rightfully popular on Chessable. They've also got tons of other new stuff on openings as well as endgames and tactics. And I always say that Woodpecker in particular is well suited to the Chessable format because it's based around spaced repetition, which of course was a foundational tenet of Chessable's company. So anyway, be sure to check out what they have. And if you sign up for Chessable Pro, use the link in the description. As for our return guest this week, you can also hear him on episode 225. He's a grandmaster, a two-time Sweden Olympiad team member, FIDE trainer, arbiter. He's also one of my favorite modern authors. His books include Pump Up Your Rating, which is a classic, and I was reviewing it in preparation for this interview, and it's still one of the best bang-for-your-buck books for improvers out there. The Woodpecker Method, of course, E3 Poison, which I actually enjoy that repertoire as well, Street Smart Chess, and, of course, the cause for this appearance, the brand new and excellent, much anticipated Woodpecker Method 2, Positional Play. That's from Quality Chess. He's also done another Chessable course called Black and White Magic. Our guest, of course, saw an impressive rating gain in his early 20s and when he started studying seriously for the first time in his life, and he used the Woodpecker Method, the famed Woodpecker Method. If you want to hear more about his background, I would check out our interview in episode 225. But without further ado, I'm excited to welcome back to the program Grandmaster Axel Smith. Welcome, Axel.
Thank you. Thanks for these nice words. It's nice to be here again.
Yeah, it's good to catch up. And I know that this has been a big project, Woodpecker Method 2. And you actually say this somewhere in the book, but it occurred to me even just thinking on my own that finding positional exercises, I think there's more than 1,000 in this book, it's got to be more challenging than tactics, because with tactics, you can just run a database query and then go from there. But I think positional puzzles, like you want them to be exact, and it's not as easy to run a query. So how much harder was it to find the material for this book, Axel?
Yeah, that's a good point. With tactics, the engines easily point out if there is a good exercise or not. And as you say, you can even use some search tool in ChessBase to find those positions. But with positional exercises, the difference between the solution and other moves are smaller. And sometimes you have to trust yourself and not only the engine, because there can be several moves that the engine point out of about equal value. But even though this is the case, one of the moves is the correct move positionally. So what I did do was I made a long list of all the standard moves I wanted to include. I went through opening after opening and just said, okay, in the French type of position, this is a standard move. We should find one exercise with this move. And then I created a database with all the games from the world champions and searched for those moves with the echo code for the openings. And as that, I collected a few hundred exercises. And then I added the ones I knew from chess history. And finally, Jakob Aagaard helped me to find more exercises, more like normal positional exercises with open files and bishop pair and all the normal positional stuff. So it took a lot more time to collect the exercises. And then also when they were there, sometimes I cannot really trust myself. I have my playing strength. So it was very great with those test readers. And also afterwards discussing the positions with Jakob Aagaard and others in Quality Chess.
Yeah, so you mentioned in the intro, test readers included Grandmaster Christopher Yu, Grandmaster Rainier Castellanos, Sam Shankland, and even Nordbrek Abdusattorov, of course, one of the top 5 players in the world now. Did you have any weaker testers, or is it you have to be a Grandmaster to get to be a tester?
I have some friends testing as well, but those names you mentioned, it was Jakob Aagaard that arranged this. And actually for Abdusattorov, I did not even know that he was doing it.
Okay.
I only knew that it was a secret 2700 guy. But it's of course nice that it was such a strong player that also improved a lot in this period.
Yeah, did he ever?
Yeah.
Yeah, and I will say, so the book, I didn't drill the 1,000 puzzles, full disclosure, but I read all the words and I looked through it and did some of them. And there are a lot of classic patterns in here. I greatly enjoyed it. And one thing that struck me, I don't know if you have this impression as well, Axel, is it didn't feel as exhausting as like solving a book full of tactics. Do you think that's true, that it's a little like more relaxing to study positional patterns than tactical ones?
Yeah, it's a good point. I think when you solve tactical exercises, there is a lot to keep in mind. You must compare positions, keep all the moves in your head. But with positional exercises, it's more like an evaluation, not just exact moves. And maybe this is a downside, because if you don't, yeah, if it's less exhausting, maybe you also memorize less and learn less. But I think you should try to do it as a game. You should try to be efficient, even though you have more time, as it's less tactics to calculate.
Yeah, I think that that's good advice. And for listeners who heard my recent interview with Matt Gross, he's kind of emphasizing pattern recognition and recognizing common patterns. So those of you looking for a way to do that, this is a great book for that. Now, having looked at some of the exercises again, but not having done all of the exercises in the book, I have my own opinion about this. But Axel, did you have like a target rating audience in mind for Woodpecker 2?
No, actually, my goal was to include all the standard moves, and that's, of course, a too ambitious goal. But I think if you just want to improve as a chess player, tactics is the most important thing. So you should start with the tactic and reach some decent level before you go on to this book. But I guess all the listeners of this podcast have already reached that level. And also in positional chess, it should not be the first book. You must learn these concepts of open files and bishop pairs and weak king before you go to these exercises. But I would say that as it's divided in different sections, starting with some easier exercises, it can be for most ambitious players. And yeah, especially if you enjoy these solving exercises and comparing your answer with the solution in the book.
Yeah, which is I certainly enjoy it. And as in the original Woodpecker, it's nice that there's so many world champion snippets and stuff, because you really get to see their moves in action and see what differentiates their play. So yeah, I really, so from my perspective, I would say maybe around 1,500 is where this comes in. I found myself getting most of the ones in the first section, and then obviously as the book goes on, they start to become a bit more challenging. And to Axel's advice of like learning positional concepts if you're not yet at that level, Axel, I don't know if you have any beginner positional primer recommendations, but I certainly could share a few if you don't.
No, I don't know, but yes, I want to say also that Jacob Borgard mentioned that even Abdusatorov and all these players you mentioned before, they made a lot of mistakes as well.
Okay. Yeah,
But
good to know.
I think if a tactical exercise is too difficult, maybe you cannot really try to solve it. But in positional exercises, you can have a guess, you can make your best, even though the positional is very difficult. So I think you can learn even from harder exercises when it's the positional ones.
Yeah, that makes sense. And just for a few recommendations for listeners, if they feel like they're not at the 1,400 or 1,500 level and don't want to start this book, or maybe shouldn't start this book, something like Yasser's Winning Chess Strategy, Simple Chess by Michael Steen, or Pawn Power in Chess. These are all books that I've recommended before, of course. Those would be good places to start. But getting back to what we were saying, Axel, about like how to use the engine with this. First, and one other thing I want to add is this is one of those books where the answers and the explanations are a big part of the book. And that's, I think, important for an exercise book like this. If it just tells you the answer, it really doesn't help you that much at all. But because the purpose of the move is explained, it's a big part of the benefit of the book. Was it challenging to write all those annotations, Axel?
I like to annotate chess, of course. It has been my job for a long time. But the challenging thing was, I think, to cut it down, so only writing the essential things. Because the Woodpecker method is about trying to be efficient and moving on. And by doing that, solutions should not be too much words. But of course, they need to be explained more than tactical exercises.
Right. Yeah, and returning to the topic of engines, so you mentioned it's not like a tactical book where there's often one clear answer. And sometimes, like, you might want to illustrate an idea, but the engine doesn't even say it's the best move. I found that even stuff like Petrosian's famous rookie exchange sacrifice, like a lot of these classic patterns that we've learned from our youth, like the engine is not necessarily that impressed with them. So did you end up just kind of not necessarily recommending the top move in all cases, the top engine move?
There are some of these cases still in the book. I think I had about like 20 or 30 exercises that Jakob Aagaard wanted to remove from the book. Because after I checked all the exercises with the engine, Jakob Aagaard did the same. And sometimes he found that, well, this is a good idea, but the engine says that other moves are equally strong. Or he says that everything is winning, so this is not a good exercise.
Right.
And for those, some I did agree with him, of course, but some I still kept because I thought the positional concept is there. This is the best move, and even though it's winning, you should make it much easier by finding this solution. But for those, I sent them to several friends just to hear their opinion as well.
Okay. Yeah, that makes sense. And it does make a difference in a tournament. Like, if you can win more quickly when you have a winning position, like the energy conservation can make a big difference later in the tournament.
Yeah, and it's easier to blunder if you only have like a winning advantage. But if you have a huge winning advantage, it's easier to win.
Yeah. Now, you reference in the book an idea or a definition of a priom taken from the Russian language. What is a priom?
I think the Wikipedia has a quite good definition. It's something like a typical maneuver or method, and it is used in for pawn moves in standard positions,
Okay.
or for typical moves in standard position. And even Wikipedia is mentioning that it's a very common move in Russian chess literature. And normally it's not translated in English as there is no equivalent word.
Yeah, I like it. I studied some Russian and lived there for a few months, but I wasn't familiar with it. But yeah, it's a useful term in any language. And Axel, in the answer section, which again is a good percentage of the book, you have like these fun quotes from chess history from some of the champions, like this quote from Kasparov: "Chess is one of the few arts where composition takes place simultaneously with performance." And then there's famous quotes from Fischer and et cetera, et cetera. Like, at what point in the book did you decide to include those? And like, how much of a distraction did it become tracking down all these quotes?
To be honest, I did include them in the first Woodpecker book, quote from the world champions. But for this second book, it was the editor, Andrew Greet, who collected all these quotes and also the illustrations in the book. So I have not even read them, so I cannot say much about them.
That's funny.
Because when I finished the draft, I completely trust the Quality Chess team. They are making a very great job in editing the book and the language and the layout. So they don't even send me the final draft before it's printed.
That's funny. I frantically was rereading mine before it came out. You've got a much more relaxed mindset, it sounds like, about it. But again, having read all the words in the book, I can tell you that no surprise that they did do a great job.
Yeah, they do.
So we've got a listener question. I'm sure many people listening are wondering. Thank you for helping to support Perpetual Chess, Gerard T. Hart. And he was just wondering when the Woodpecker 2 will be available on Chessable.
I think before Christmas. I did schedule 2 weeks in May and June to record it, but Chessable had not prepared the files by then. And now I have other things, some other commitments, so I will wait until maybe October to record it. And then they need some time editing all the videos.
Okay, yeah. So I would guess it'll be available by the end of the year. And again, very good format for Chessable, because you do, there's been a raging debate. I don't know if you've seen any articles by my friend FM Nate Solon, or I actually wrote about this in my book a little bit, Axel, just wondering how useful spaced repetition is for sort of intermediate to advanced tactics. But I will say, like, for positional puzzles, it has to be good. The whole point is to have access to these ideas that you might not have. So I think it's unequivocally Chessable is a good place to learn, and making an effort to remember the patterns is well worthwhile in my opinion. Do you have any new thoughts? Like, have you seen any of these articles or discussions about like how useful it is to review tactics that are not necessarily like classic patterns?
No, I cannot say that I follow any debate. I have some students always coming to me and say well, I did solve this woodpecker book 7 times and I improved a lot, and now can you try help to coach me? And of course, it's nice to hear those words. Still, it's no proof at all. It's just anecdotes, and as they are spending a lot of time with chess, they should have improved even doing something else.
Yeah, that was what Nate concluded in his article, is that the best thing about the Woodpecker method is that it gives you a plan and a commitment method. So, and so many things don't do that. So if you're just committing to putting that many hours in, whether it's the best way to study or not, it's certainly good, you know?
Great. I did not think in that way. When I started a woodpecker myself, I think it was 15 years ago or something, I did spend so much time in chess anyway, so I did not need this motivation.
Right.
But yeah, that's the point, that it gives you
Yeah.
a clear plan and that you schedule the time to really do chess.
Yeah, and you do go through instructions as you do in Woodpecker 1. In Woodpecker 2, you do go through instructions of how to review the puzzles in basically declining segments of time, culminating in trying to complete all of the puzzles in one day. So I was curious, Axel, with a plan like that, is that something you would do as part of a general study regimen, or would this be like a separate like boot camp sort of setup?
Yeah, of course it depends on how much time you have, and I'm thinking that, okay, making the woodpecker needs so much time so you cannot do anything else.
Right.
But then I was thinking, of course you should play, that's enjoyable,
Right.
and then you must analyze your games and you must prepare for your games as well. So even though you plan to do mostly the woodpecker, there is a lot of other things in chess you cannot really avoid. But of course, for the last sessions where you should do it very intensely, that should not be the day before the tournament. It's too exhausting. So for those days, you need to schedule days only doing this.
Yeah, that was sort of what I concluded. In a perfect world, you would be doing other stuff as well, but it's so hard to commit, and you're asking for a lot of commitment if you pursue the plan that's laid out. So it would need to be, I think, more often than not, all inclusive. But I also, as in Woodpecker 1, this is something that I am Kostya Kravitsky has brought up, is that like on the topic of this debate about reviewing tactics, he's like, the main thing to keep in mind is Woodpecker 1 is just a good book. It just has really good exercises in it. So however you use it, it's not, it doesn't take away from the value of it as a chess book. And I feel the same way about this. I do firmly believe, and I'm hoping to do it myself at some point, that it's worth it to review these patterns in particular. But at the same time, if you just want to like take a more casual approach and see what's in there, I think that has value as well.
Yeah, I think for the positional exercises, you need more time, at least in the first cycle, to check the solutions. Because with the tactical exercises, when you see the solution, normally you understand it.
Right.
You just did not think about this variation. But for a positional exercise, you might need some time to really understand what's going on.
Yeah.
And I think I know my wife has started to read this book, and I think she has not much time for chess. So for her, it will take maybe a year to finish the book. So she is not doing it in the woodpecker way, but hopefully it's giving her something anyway.
Yeah, and I also think that as we stated earlier, like I think you might need more time to go through the answers, but at least for me, I think you might need less time to go through the puzzles. So it kind of evens out. Although if I had done more of the hardest ones, maybe I would be singing a different tune. So one other question I had about the woodpecker, too, Axel, is you, as you said, you came up with the patterns just from memory, and then sort of went looking for the specific ideas carried out by the world champions. Were there any world champions whose play surprised you as you went through all of these exercises or compiled them?
It's a boring answer, but I would say no. I was actually more focusing on the positions and not the names. So I did not really think about the players too much, more about the typical plans.
Okay, yeah, that
And
makes sense.
I did also use some books about chess, like my great predecessors from Kasparov, to check the games there and see if there were exercises, and some of them are included also. So those books are mentioned in the list in the book. But mostly I did search for specific moves, not really caring too much about which of the world champions that played it.
Okay. Yeah, that makes sense. So, Axel, I want to transition to reviewing some ideas from Pump Up Your Rating because, as I've mentioned many times, I mean, I love all of your books, but it's a particular favorite. And we should mention that even though I'm sitting here like gushing about your books, none of this is a paid endorsement. I'm just a legitimate fan of Axel's, and I think he's one of the best writers in recent decades. So I'm happy to have him here. But before we do that, I did want to give a shout out to a company that is a paid sponsor of Perpetual Chess, which is Chess Universe. It's an app available on both Google Play and Apple. The Apple App Store. You can play friends, strangers, bots. You can get lessons based on, different phases of the game, whether it be practicing checkmate, studying the patterns, tactical patterns of the greats. It is free to use, and you can become a VIP to unlock additional features. It's free to use for as long as you want to use it for free. And as always, you can find the link to download Chess Universe in the episode description, as well as links of anything else we discuss. So, Axel, on the topic of Pump Up Your Rating, as I mentioned many times, I mean, the whole book is good, but my favorite is like the last chapter, which is kind of like a compendium of just sort of loose, useful advice. And it had been a while since I had reviewed it. And I thought it might be interesting to bounce some ideas off of you because you were much younger when you wrote it. And now you've got kids, you've got a family. You do still manage to compete with some frequency, but I'm sure your perspective, you alluded yourself to how in your 20s, you were just wholly surrounded by chess and really pushing to get better and did get a lot better. But now I'm guessing your approach is more casual. Before we get to my specific questions about the book, is there anything that just as time has gone on and your life, you've gained more life experience, is there anything that has changed in your own thinking about how to approach getting better at chess just from your life experiences and teaching experiences?
Well, it was a long time since I read Pump Up Your Rating, but I can really imagine that I did not consider this, that you don't have you have a limited number of hours to spend on chess.
Right.
So in that time, I did not have any other commitments at all. So I could just do how much I wanted.
Yeah.
So this part is not mentioned at all in Pump Up Your Rating. And this very comprehensive training schedule that is mentioned there is not possible for most persons.
Yeah. So what advice would you give if a student comes to you and says they read that comprehensive advice, but they just can't do it? How would you recommend they modify their
nowadays
regimen?
I think I would focus less on openings.
Mm-hmm.
There is a chapter in Pump Up Your Rating about that, and it's very detailed how to study it and find moves on your own. And I think in a quite high level, it's not so important. And I can even see now in my games that I still use the openings that I learned like 10 years ago. I did not check many new openings in the recent years. I just used the old analysis, and it's still working quite well. So I can play dubious openings because today, with today's engines, some of my openings are really dubious, but it works even in a 2400 level.
That's great. Are you still playing the E3 Poison?
Yeah, from time to time. I always try to play things that the opponent has not prepared. So it depends on the opponent.
Okay. Yeah, as I mentioned, I'm a fan of that repertoire as well. So some of the advice that I found particularly resonant, because I was this was a topic of my recent Chessable course, identifying critical moments. And you actually write in Pump Up Your Rating that your most important advice is to learn to play fast in positions that aren't critical. So I was curious, Axel, what advice you have for identifying those situations.
I think the mindset of trying to identify him is valuable in itself. If you think in this way during the game, then you are already taking a big path towards finding those moments. And also experience, of course, doing this for several tournaments, you get better. But there are also some more concrete advice, like if there are pieces hanging, if there are checks, if you make a decision that you cannot take back, like castling either long or short. When you have castle, your king is there. And when pushing pawns, etc. So when you are taking decisions that cannot be taken back, or the position is very tactical, those are normally the critical ones. But then, of course, those critical positions can be divided into very critical and less critical. But
Yeah.
I think that is more experience.
Yeah. But that's a really good point about moves that you can't take back. I wish I had mentioned that in my course, because there is a lot of sort of philosophical overlap, and it's taken me. I'm older than you. I'm in my mid to late 40s, Axel, and it's taken me. It's only in the last 5 years where I've managed to develop a framework where I'm sort of constantly thinking about if it's a critical moment, and it's helped me become a more practical player. But I feel like it shouldn't have been that hard for me. But better late than never, I guess.
And I also realized that exchanges should be mentioned as well, because that's the same thing. You cannot take back the piece that is exchanged.
Yeah. Oh, that's a good point too. Yeah. So another quote I wanted to bounce off you, and it's kind of fun since you say you yourself haven't revisited this book in a long time, which makes sense. But I can see if you have any modern reflections. You in writing about managing time trouble, you say, and I was curious if you're still able to follow this since you played a handful of tournaments this year. You write, the consequence of the mistakes made in time trouble should be equal to the consequences of the mistakes caused by playing too fast. So you write that in relation to an effort to play with a firm pace, with a quick pace earlier in the game. And you're saying all your blunders shouldn't be in time trouble, because if you're speeding up, they could also come earlier. Are you finding that occurs in your games? Are you meeting that threshold?
I think when I wrote it in the book, I could not follow it at all. Because I think for ambitious players, it is a tendency to try to play better than you are.
Right.
And it gives maybe worse results, but it also helps you to improve. But nowadays, I think it's easy for me because I have no ambitions in chess, and I'm worse in tactical positions than before. My openings are not so sharp anymore also. And when I stopped practicing chess, I think it was when I became a grandmaster. I started to drop in playing strength also. I think I lost maybe 120 points as a maximum. But then now I started to play more practical and in a way compensate for the lost abilities. So now I have two good years. I only lost one game in those years. I think I only played 50 games or something like this. But still, for me, it's easier to play now when I just try to play. So I still think it's a good advice, but it's difficult to follow.
And yeah, I agree. And that's heartening to hear that you still feel like you're able to play at a good level, just sort of from a psychological, putting less pressure on yourself. Do you think that having kids has made a difference in that regard?
I think the main difference for me is that I do not practice so much chess. I play less also. So when I play chess, I'm more motivated. I enjoy it more actually when I play.
Oh, wow. That's good to hear.
And also with the kids, during the weekdays, I'm with the kids maybe 9 hours a day, and in the weekends it's even more. So when you're off a weekend playing chess, it can be quite nice sometimes.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Not to misunderstand that, of course, but
I think any parent listening understands understands fully well, and even people without kids. And you wrote in Pump Up Your Rating that the difference between a good and bad tournament often comes down to how well you manage to keep non-chess thoughts away during a game. So when you do get back to the board, are you able to sort of fully focus?
I think it's about motivation. If you practice a lot and it's an important tournament, you have invested a lot of time in this tournament, it's easier to push yourself to really think during the whole game, because it is exhausting. It is very demandable just to sit there and not think of other things. And as for myself, well, not as good as it used to be, but I think I'm okay in that sense, especially now when I don't play much chess and really enjoy when I get to do it.
And you also wrote in your book about, and this is something that's come up a decent amount on the podcast, the importance of process-related goals rather than outcome-related goals. How has your goal setting changed? Like, do you manage to only want to have fun when you show up these days?
Yeah, my first goal is to enjoy. Mm-hmm. And second goal is to have enough time to run in the morning and in the evening. And the third goal is maybe to play a decent chess. But when I'm starting to prepare before the game, it's just like it was before. Then I'm putting all the effort into the game, and also when I play, I try to do it. But before tournaments, I seldom have some goals. So I'm not an ambitious player in that sense. So this advice of setting goals and like this, it's not for me anymore.
And we talked a little about your passion for distance running. Grandmaster Agard also mentioned it in our recent interview. So you say you're not an ambitious player at this point. Are you an ambitious runner? Are you outcome driven in that regard?
Yeah, I can talk hours about it, but maybe not in this podcast. But yeah, I have increased my volume year by year, and it's fine. I've not been injured in 2 years now, so amazing. I run maybe 20 kilometers a day. Now I even did quit my normal job to focus on running this autumn. So I'm 38, so maybe I have a few more years. I can still improve a little. So I want to give it what I can.
Is this your job editing the Swedish chess magazine?
Yeah, I did quit it now after 10 years this summer.
Wow.
And I enjoy. I have more time in everyday life for the kids and for the house, and also for running and resting. And
so 7 days a week, 20 kilometers.
Yeah, in average, that's the case.
That's incredible. So how many hours would that take you on a typical day?
Well, it depends. I spend some other times training, cycling a little bit, making some strength training, and so I don't know. Maybe I spend like 15 hours a week on running, something like this. But it's a different. When I started chess, I only did it because it was fun, and it has been fun all the time. But in one point, it became my job. But for running, it's not possible for me to reach this level. So I like the process of becoming better, but without having any pressure at all, because it's just a hobby anyway, even though I spend most of my time on running.
And I'm a casual, I just run for fitness, more like 5 kilometers a few times a week. But even doing that level, there are periods where it's not fun. Do you enjoy, do you have periods of agony that you need to push through when you're doing these long daily runs?
No, I don't think so. Of course, running is not always fun. But we are some people in my town that run. So quite often, like half of the time, I have some company, and it's more like sometimes it's difficult to plan it with family life, and my wife is not so happy that I say, okay, I'm very flexible. Instead of running this hour, I can run next hour. But she thinks that is not really flexible.
That's funny. And are your times, how closely are you tracking your times, and are they still improving? How are you? 30, late 30s? How old are you?
38, yeah.
38, yeah.
Yeah, I've made some PBs this year, so I think I can improve a little bit more. And I'm measuring everything. I will start even having some lactate, taking some blood after the training just to see how intense it has been. And so I'm doing what I can in my level.
That's incredible. And I think I might have asked you this last time, but I'm going to ask you again because I don't remember the answer. But when you do go jogging or running, are you listening to music? Are you listening to audiobooks, podcasts, none of the above? How do you pass the time?
Normally nothing, but sometimes I'm listening to running podcasts.
Oh,
That's all.
okay.
I have been trying to make some even solving chess puzzles or revisiting openings, but when I run, my thoughts are going so slowly, so it's not valuable at all.
Wow. That's incredible. And
But
your
I think
body is,
it's sometimes to relax for the mind also, so you
yeah,
don't
for
need to fill
sure.
this time with something.
And so were you a runner when you were training to become a grandmaster?
I
We,
did start running to help my chess back in 2012 or 2013. Then I was running like 5 kilometers each second day.
right. More, yeah. And do you think so when you do come back to chess, being probably when you play in a tournament, being probably the fittest person in the room, do you feel like that makes a difference in your ability to focus?
I think I'm focusing better now, but it's more like I'm not spending too much time on chess. When I was ambitious, I did prepare too much. I did spend like 4 or 5 hours before a game preparing the opening, and then I was a little bit exhausted and tired of chess when the game started.
Right.
So more
And
about that. I think many people can focus quite good even though they are not exercising too much.
And do you find it extra challenging? You mentioned that you'll go running even on days where you have a league game or whatever it may be for chess. Do you find it extra challenging to play a competitive game after having run that day?
No, I don't think so, but maybe I'm wrong. Maybe I'm just making this picture because I don't want to omit the running.
Okay.
Yeah.
Wow. That's great and really impressive dedication. And last question, I just find it fascinating on the running front. So, I mean, it sounds like you're primarily a marathon runner, or are you like eyeing ultra marathons as well?
I enjoy even the small competitions in running, the small courses. So I do everything from 1500 up to marathon. But I think longer distances are not for me, at least not those years. I'm too afraid of getting injured if I run longer than a marathon.
Okay. That's really interesting and yeah, incredibly impressive. Even if your wife may get tired of it, I for one am really impressed with
Thank
the
you.
dedication that it shows. And speaking of your wife, another question I had was in Pump Up Your Rating, you talk about how one shouldn't take draws. You should really try to cultivate the skill of not taking draws. And you mentioned that before you and your wife became a couple, you guys actually played a competitive game. And you said you even in that game you weren't going to give a draw. But I was curious if there were any draws offered in that game.
Yeah, I don't remember writing about it, but yeah, I remember the game. It was quite equal for like 25 moves, but no, there were no draw offers. And we
Okay.
have played 5 classical rated games after we became a couple also, but no draw offers and no draws in those games.
Okay.
Yeah, and I remember also once in a rapid tournament, I played in the last round, and I needed a draw to secure first prize and 200 euros. But I played on and I lost. So we lost some
Okay.
money there, but it felt good to play.
Yeah, I think a lot of people, if you play long enough, you'll end up with a story like that. And as long as you're not like living hand to mouth, unable to buy your next meal, I think it usually will lead to a good feeling where you say, you know what, I did the right thing. I didn't get the outcome I wanted, um, but but I'm still proud of it nonetheless. And speaking of living hand to mouth, you had a throwaway line in the new book that I found fascinating. You said you were recognized while dumpster diving. You were recognized for your chess work while dumpster diving. Could you tell that story?
Yeah, okay, it's true. I think it's a bit surprising that many people know quite a lot about chess and the chess world, even though they are not chess players, and I've never seen them in the chess club. So they know about all the streamers and a lot of things going on. Sometimes they even know more than me. But there was one guy recognizing me there, and I did dumpster dive a lot for a few years. I think we had more than half of our food from containers, very good food that shops throw away. But then last year I fell and broke my arm. I did. It was not while dumpster diving. It was while carpeting in the house. So then I could not do it for a few years. For a few months, you need to climb the fences, and afterwards, I have not really started again. But my daughter is always asking when, because she joined me quite a lot. So when we will go
Wow.
again. So I hope it will be this winter.
All those Chessable courses and books sold, and you're still dumpster diving for food. Huh?
But it feels good because all those foods just go burned and to
Goes to
waste.
waste,
It's yeah,
yeah.
for the climate and everything.
Yeah, that makes sense. And I was curious because I do feel like I haven't seen hard data about this, but my sort of impression of some of the most successful, especially books, but also Chessable courses of the past few years. Obviously, Levi Rosman's book is probably the biggest hit of the past few years, but Chessable wise, I mean, yours certainly has to be up there along with stuff like the Checkmate Patterns manual. I'm curious if the landmark success that your book and courses have had, has that changed your life at all?
Well, again, a boring answer, but I don't think so. Money has never been really an issue in our family. We live very cheaply, so we don't really need an income at all, I think. So,
That's
well,
nice to hear.
yeah.
Although I mean, I guess it probably at least helped the decision to quit your editing job.
I could have quit like 10 years ago before I even
Okay.
started, but I think it's more like for the editing job that I was thinking who should take over and what is happening with the magazine. I felt some responsibility. And also in Sweden, it's not very normal to focus on your hobby and not work when you're like still not even 40.
Hmm.
So it was more like that. What is people thinking and can I do this? But now when I did start it, it feels great.
And
So
what did
I'm working sometimes. I'm doing some small chess columns for Swedish newspapers. Yeah, and I'm doing some small things as well. But
okay. And how do people respond? Was the reaction of people as surprised as you expected it would be?
well, I'm not talking too much about it. With I did say that I quit my job, but I'm not really calling myself a runner. That is what I want to do because I think calling yourself something, it should not only be for the pros, those on a high level. You should be able to do what you want.
Yeah.
But when I started to write books, I think I published some 6 chess books and 3 other books as well. Still, it's difficult for me to call me an author. I don't. I think
Huh.
it's other ones that have to use this term.
What are the non-chess books?
I made one book about athletes that trained too hard and was burned out.
Hmm.
It's in Swedish. And then I made one book about my grandmother. It was like 80 copies. It's a big book, but it was only for family
Okay.
and
Time
then a small
consuming.
children book, also quite personal
Okay.
one.
That's great. Um, well, bringing it back to chess improvement, Axel, I wanted to ask you because again, I have immense respect for all of your work, and I think that you're a good person to get on the record on this. So, a lot of people like to debate about why it is that adults struggle to improve at chess. So, I'm curious what you think the biggest challenge is. So, what is the number one reason?
Of course, everyday life is in the way. You have a limited number of hours, you have your work and family. But I also think the attitude that adults, it's more difficult to improve you when you're adult, that it's stopping you somehow. And also, yeah, you can try to improve, it does not help. Really, of course, the brain is working slightly slower and memorizing things less efficient, but it does not help thinking about this. But I also think that adult or older players, they are structuring things too much. Like if I learn a new language, I want to write down all the words that I learn. I want to write down all the grammatical roots instead of just talking like a kid does. And maybe it's the same in chess. If you learn a new opening, you want to learn everything. You want to be very structured. But maybe it's better just to learn a little bit here and a little bit there and play and yeah.
Interesting, although that's kind of the opposite of the woodpecker like binge, of the
Yeah, but okay, the woodpecker is very structured when you spend your time and how you do it. But still, the knowledge, you do not write down what you learned. This is a standard move. There is no list of all the standard moves. Those are learned only from positions. And then the brain should like categorize them, but without doing this conscious.
okay. And as someone, so as we were discussing before we recorded, I recently interviewed your Swedish compatriot Tiger Hillar Persson, who is in his 50s and is not as dedicated to chess improvement as he once was, but is very dedicated to Go improvement. And it was an amazing conversation. And Tiger shared a lot of insights about sort of what he's able to bring from the Go world to his chess teaching and thinking. And I'm curious, Axel, since you trained so hard in the realm of distance running, if there's any insights that come to mind for you in terms of like how you approach improving your times in running that could be applicable to us chess players.
Well, first of all, now I know what to listen when I'm running this evening.
Yeah, and listen to his new chess interview too. They're both really good.
But for the running, I think it's more... I spent more time with chess, of course. I played for full time for a few years, and I was a coach for many years and wrote all these books. So it's more like the dedication I spent with chess helps me when I'm doing the running.
Okay, but no insights from running in particular?
Not what I'm thinking about for the moment.
Okay, and with running, obviously, the physical repetition, I shouldn't say obviously, because this is just sheer conjecture on my part, but my guess is that the physical repetition is the thing that leads to the improvement the most. Is there anything you do away from the actual running that you feel really gives you a good return on your time in improving your running?
I do like 15 minutes strength training 3 days a week. Maybe that is all. And I'm doing some cycling indoor when I'm having some slight injury or even if I'm running too much. But I think in chess, you can spend all your time trying to train efficiently. In running, you should maybe just do maximum effort, a slight amount of your training, maybe 20 or 30%, and then the rest is just jogging. So there is a difference that in chess, you must plan all your time trying to be efficient, but in running, you can just go out.
Okay, that's interesting. Well, to me, as I've mentioned, most chess training that isn't calculation training, to me, feels more like jogging.
Okay, but still you need a plan. You can, what openings to learn and what games to analyze.
Yeah. Well, Axel, this has been great. As we wrap up, I actually wanted to ask you a question that I asked you in our 2021 interview, but, it's been 3 years, and, opinions change over time. So you wrote in Pump Up Your Rating that the four primary components of chess improvement advice were: 1, analyzing your games and making a list of mistakes; 2, using a De La Maza approach program to study tactics like Woodpecker Method; 3, doing serious opening work via the creation of opening files in ChessBase; and 4, mastering approximately 100 key theoretical endgames. So as you hear that, I forgot to check the publication year of Pump Up Your Rating. Was it 2013?
Yeah.
11 years later. Does it still ring true to you?
I think, like I said before, skip the openings. You can learn it easily by having a good book, and also changing openings sometimes to learn different kinds of position, but you don't need to be that detailed.
Okay.
And as for the end games, to learn those 100 position, it's not a great effort. You can do it quite easily, and you do it once and then you repeat them from time to time. So they are valuable to include, even though maybe they do not appear so often in your games. And for the other 2 things, I still think this is the most important things: doing the tactics and making the list of mistakes after analyzing your games.
There you have it. Okay. Well, Axel, again, fantastic work on this book. I know it took you and the Quality Chess team a ton of work, but very worthwhile and a great tool that, again, is not as challenging, or I feel like it's not as demanding and not as exhausting, I should say, as Woodpecker 1 in my mind, but probably just as rewarding. So we'll look forward to that coming on Chessable. Well, Axel, this has been a lot of fun. Do you have any closing chess or life advice before we bid farewell? Oh, sorry, I do have one more question. Do you know what do you have another chess project in the works, or are you going to take a break now and only run?
I'm planning to take a break. I'm writing something about running as well. So I have this project and running myself. But yeah, one day I will do some more chess book. I'm sure for that, but not in the next year, at least.
Okay. Glad to hear it. Well-deserved break, and good luck, both when you make it to the chessboard and with your continued rigorous running training, Axel.
Yeah, thanks. It has been nice to talk with you.
Yeah, always a pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you.